Nothing will ever beat hard-working teams. I don't care what kind of robot it is. I don't care what kind of system you put in place. I don't care what you do. Nothing will ever beat Teamsters. It never happened. It never did, and it never will.
The facts, dates, and events presented in this video are from the members' best recollection and may not be fully accurate. This video is intended for entertainment purposes only. Always consult with your local union about your rights and duties at your workplace. The opinions shared on this video are our own and do not necessarily represent my employer's positions, strategies, or opinions. All views shared are protected under the National Labor Relations Act.
What is going on, everybody? So today I have Greg Kerwood out of Local 25 in Boston and Richard Hooker, Principal Officer 63 in Philadelphia. And it's been a hot minute since we've all been on the show together, so the boys are back in town. We're going to be covering layoffs. This is something we're going to be covering for the next few months. It's as long as it's a topic, we're going to be covering it because I know there's a lot of people out there out on layoff or they're worried about being laid off, and it's just going to be something we're going to keep pounding on to show where everything's at and give our perspective on things. So the first thing I want to ask, I'm going to throw this to both of you real quick, actually first Greg, is that we see these layoffs that are really bad in January. Where have you seen it? Has it slowed down at all?
Well, from what I see firsthand, it seems to have sort of evened off. But I wouldn't want to make light of it. Layoffs are never a good thing. Obviously, to the members laid off, it's the worst thing possible. So we certainly don't want to sugarcoat it as, we've stopped the bleeding, so everybody's fine. But I would say that things have leveled off somewhat, at least from where I am. And hopefully once we get into summer vacations and things, it'll turn around.
And so that's the case in Boston, but I'm going to throw it over to you, Rich. What have you seen in Philly?
Well, right after peak season was over, I mean, it was really, really, really bad. Layoffs, we had already lost 2 shifts because of the volume. And so those folks were laid off and displaced. Now, some of them were not technically laid off. They were laid off from their job, but not laid off from work. Now things have slowed down a bit. Even some people, I believe, have started to come back to work. Because the volume has picked up some. But like Greg said, this is anybody, one person laid off is a problem, right? And so this is not to try to say that, oh my God, we're turning the corner. No, this is just saying that they have slowed down and hopefully we can bring all of our laid off members back to work.
I know that not every place is the same. Like, we just had some layoffs happen in my own building. But, leave a comment down below where you're at, what you've seen, to get a gauge. Everybody's kind of curious about this right now. Now, we've noticed that there's been a lot of finger pointing in all this, even in the media and everything else. Now, people they'll blame our contract. They'll blame the union. Now, Rich, what's your take on all this?
So I would say this. I think the finger pointing, some of it, I totally understand. It's frustration. You look at the language and you see how it plays when Carol Tomei and the company talks about automation and things like that. And I can see the frustration. But I don't think the finger pointing, no, I don't even think, I know the finger pointing, it's not going to help. But what I do think will help is if all of us come together and talk about solutions and how we plan on fighting this automation. Now, we can't stop it, but there is ways where we can soften the blow. But it has to start with all of us. The leaders, the rank and file, has to start having these conversations about, okay, when this does happen, what is the game plan? And I think that's where we do have to have a plan from leadership, talks to us about, hey, this is what's going to happen once UPS decides to go this way. This is what we're going to do. But I think now members, their shop stewards, the locals have to start talking about, hey, what is it going to look like for our building? And talk about it, address these concerns with the leadership at the IBT level so they'll know 623, 25, 728, and other locals where they're staying and where they're coming from when we talk about addressing these layoffs and automation problems.
I know that there was a webinar recently, with the talking about supervisor workings and everything else that the IBT pulled, and that was good because it kind of gives an idea of where people need to focus their energy on, because it is one thing when you see a supervisor working, but it's a completely different thing when you see a supervisor working and then you see a bunch of people laid off on top of it. Now, we're going to be talking about, as far as, why is this happening? Why are we having so many layoffs right now? What's your take on this, Greg?
Well, I think there's obviously no question the volume has dropped from where it was. But I think there's a larger game at play here. The company is clearly not satisfied with the show of power that they saw during the contract campaign. And almost immediately, they tried to find ways to diffuse that and to get members back on edge and afraid. Like I said, the volume has dropped off because the pandemic has ended. But we're still, if you look at the graph, UPS's profits from prior to the pandemic till now are still on the increase. There's been, there was a boom during the pandemic that has tailed off, but the profits now versus say the profits in 2020, it's still going up. The company's not losing money. It's not hurting. Carol Tomei just got a huge raise. The shareholders are getting big bucks. This isn't a yellow freight situation. And I think it's important that people keep in mind, especially given her speech that's making the rounds, she's talking to shareholders in that speech. She's telling them what they want to hear. When she says they're going to automate, 400 buildings, 200 buildings, whatever it is, by 2028 and all that stuff, those are promises that they throw out there to get people to think that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? Same thing with the layoffs. We're trimming the fat. We're cutting the costs. We're going to save this many billion and that many billion in our profits. I mean, they're not going to get on there and say, listen, everything's bad. It's horrible. It sucks. We're going to hire a whole bunch of people and we got to pay Teamsters a lot of money. And so therefore our profits are going to decrease, right? They're not going to tell the shareholders that. They're going to tell them, give them a rosy picture. So they, keep investing in the company and buying more shares and holding the shares they have. That's her job when she's speaking to shareholders. And so you can't take that video and that speech out of context and start putting it out like this is some sort of crystal ball that Carol Tomei has to predict what the world's going to look like in 2028.
And you just mentioned something about the 200 automated hubs. And I think a lot of people out there read that headline. Maybe their heart stopped. They were a little freaked out by it. Is my job going away? Are we going to be ran by robots in 2028? Rich, you've seen some of these automated hubs. I mean, what's your take on these automated hubs?
I think that UPS tries to outsmart themselves, right? These, for an example, in our airport building, right? They put in this new SLS system that is supposed to do all this work. Well, it breaks down a lot. And guess who had to call on to do the work? The members, right? Nothing will ever beat hard-working teams. I don't care what kind of robot it is. I don't care what kind of system you put in place. I don't care what you do. Nothing will ever beat Teamsters. It never happened. It never did, and it never will. And I think that's a message that we need to start telling our members. Yeah, I get what she's saying, but I'm telling you something. If workers put their hands in their pocket, it won't matter what kind of SLS, robot, automation, nothing moves without Teamsters moving it. And that will always be my take on automation. I get it, we can't stop it from happening, but my money, and I'm not a betting man, but if I was a betting man, I'm always going to bet on the human being and the Teamsters. I haven't found anybody who could beat the Teamsters yet, and UPS is not going to be the first one to do it.
And so, Greg, you're here back in '08. Volume's dipping. And, similar to '08, we saw the volume dip. But what's the difference now from '08?
Well, there's a few differences. I think '08 was a far more drastic economic situation. Like I said, they've taken a sort of a minor bump in the road here and made it look like it's much worse than it is, just to scare the members. And the other thing is, back in '08, they were scrambling for business to try to drum up business, to bring back business, to win new business. Due to this better, not bigger approach that has eliminated the sales department, there's really no one left to go out and drum up that business, which is an interesting approach to generating profits. So it's this. There's a different mentality, and I think again, my concern is that people are buying into all this stuff and they're starting to fight with one another, fight with their local, fight with their stewards, blame, as Rich mentioned, the finger pointing and everything else over something that really isn't what they're making it appear to be. And that's not to belittle anyone who's out on the street, not working and everything else. Obviously, you're going through what you're going through. And, I feel for you. And like Rich said, everybody should be standing together, filing on supervisors working, getting their 8-hour requests in, being on the 9-5 list, getting our members back to work. But at the same time, we can't take what UPS says is happening at face value. We know this company lies about everything whenever it's convenient. So just because Carol Tomei says something is happening or is going to happen, that says to me right away, it's probably not the truth. And in reality, it isn't. The numbers are not that bad. Their profits are not down over the long term. They're down over the short term. And so there's really no reason to believe that the end is nigh or that we're all going to be out of work in 3 years or any of the other nonsense that's going around.
All right. So if you have not done so already, follow the Teamster Media Hub on Facebook. Greg Kerwood created it, runs it, everything else. And 623 Lives Matter, Facebook, Instagram, all social medias. Shout outs. Greg, who are you looking to shout out?
I'm going to have to stick with our brothers and sisters at Molson Coors. They're still on strike. If you are drinking a Molson Coors product, please stop. Don't buy it. Don't support it. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors. These folks are down there. They're fighting the same fight that we fought, that we will fight again. And we need to have their back and make sure that we're standing with them. So shout out to them for standing tough and staying strong.
Absolutely. Rich.
I don't know if this is a shout out, but I just want to just kind of just tell our members, this is a time for all of us to come together. This is a very, very difficult time. And the best way to show the company that we're all unified and that we all are going to have each other's back is just about continue to hold them accountable. File for the supervisors working. Like Greg said, the 905s, the 8-hour requests. And again, get with your local, get with your steward, your BAs, come up with a plan for when this automation and these layoffs to continue. Come up with a plan to talk about it and then let the international know, hey man, this is what we want to see done, because ultimately we all in this together, right? This is not anybody's fault, right? We can point fingers all day. I don't want to go too long on this, Dave, but this just been heavy on me because I don't want it to look like that we're losing. UPS is very, very good at making us feel defeated, and first thing we do, we turn on each other, and that to me is the worst thing we could do right now. I remember Dennis Howard. He came to my local to do our shop stewards class, and he talked about how it was back in the day where Teamsters, if somebody would have got laid off and they lost their job, other Teamsters families would come together to make sure that those folks had food on the table. And that's what we got to do now. We got to come together from the Teamsters of old, do the same thing. Because again, like I said earlier, nobody can beat us if we're together. Hasn't happened yet, and I don't think it ever will.
Yes, Rich, you're absolutely right. And for the people who like to attack their own union, what is the ending, solution to that? I make a great living because of all this, and I'm very fortunate in this. And this is one of the main reasons why I do what I do with the channel and everything else. It's because, this job has brought me a lot of what I have in my life, you know, and it means a lot to me. I know not everything's always perfect, but I think it's important that we all stick together. So that's all I got, everybody. I love you, and I'll see you next time.